Good news, bad news. Good news is Tyreek Hill's playing. Bad news is looks like the man has a torn ligament in his wrist. Now, obviously, I'm an idiot. Obviously, I don't know exactly what this means in terms of the fantasy football impact that we should expect. But maybe this has something to do with the fact that Tyreek Hill has been very bad over the past 2 weeks. Maybe this can be used as an excuse. I think it will be very interesting to see what happens in the game tonight with Tyreek. Obviously, I'm still viewing Tyreek Hill as a must-start option. Looking at the rankings on the sites, these are the expert averages, but Tyreek Hill currently is about 14. If you sort by my own rankings instead, I have Tyreek Hill down, at 13, right back-to-back with Gibbs and Walker. If Tyreek has a very disappointing performance tonight, I could very easily see me actually moving Tyreek Hill down a little bit further here. The other updates that we have, DK Metcalf expected to practice on Wednesday. Good news, right? Because if you are looking at Metcalf, this is a receiver that, one, I just traded for in the Flock League, but two, missed the 2 weeks prior before the bye. You get the bye week. So now he has had officially 3 weeks to recover here in Seattle. So I'm really hoping that Metcalf is able to come out strong. Going through and looking at any other updates, we have Brian Robinson Jr. limited in practice on Monday. This is a situation where he has practiced every single day, pretty much every single week, and he's missing regardless. So I would love to say, oh, this is great news. See Brian Robinson Jr. at practice on Monday, but this isn't something new here. We've kind of seen this over and over and over again at this point. McCarthy says Cooper Rush is going to remain the Cowboys' starting quarterback. With this, am I sitting here saying that, oh, okay, all of a sudden Lamb is worse? No, obviously, it doesn't freaking matter. The quarterback situation is garbage, whether it's Lance or Rush. Keon Coleman ruled out for week 11. So I want to say that Amari's exciting. You have Kincaid injured. You have Keon already ruled out. But the issue is similar to Brian Robinson. Amari's consistently been at practice himself. However, we have yet to see Amari come back in. And then Dable says, when asked if Daniel Jones will remain the team's starting quarterback, we're to spend a lot of time watching tape and evaluating things. Now, obviously, I'm an idiot, but I read this and I think this is a fancy way of saying no. Seems like Daniel Jones may get benched coming out of the bye week here. Joe Flacco going to remain the starting quarterback for the Colts. I think Josh Downs is a safe buy low candidate. Aaron Jones considered day to day, expected to be healthy for week 11. So with this, probably shouldn't waste a spot on Cam Akers with the waiver wire this week. Unless you're in a spot, of course, that maybe we don't have Aaron Jones at practice on Tuesday. He's not at practice on Wednesday. He's not at practice on Thursday. He's not at practice on Friday. If Aaron Jones doesn't practice Friday and then Akers is sitting out there as a free agent, obviously you can pick him up. Reed says that Isaiah Pacheco is close to returning to practice. Big news here. I know some people are upset with how high we ranked Pacheco in the rest of season rankings in the video today, but it does seem like Pacheco is a couple weeks out from returning, and very similar to what happened with CMC. Once Pacheco's at practice, it'll be too late to trade for him. Then at that point, you're not going to be able to. Lawrence uncertain for week 11. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they shut Lawrence down. Last I saw, this is actually pretty funny, but if the season ended right now, which obviously is not remotely close to happening, but hypothetically, if the season ended now, you would actually have the Jacksonville Jaguars with the number 1 pick in this year's NFL draft. It would go Jacksonville, the Giants, Tennessee, Cleveland, Las Vegas, Miami, New England, the Jets, New Orleans, Carolina. Crazy to see that Carolina is still on this list. But it's just also crazy to see is the fact that right now, literally 11 teams in the NFL have 3 or fewer wins. 5 teams in the NFL have 2 wins. Now, the coaching staff in Chicago may be getting mixed up here. You're kind of hoping that the offensive coordinator does end up getting fired. Obviously, it was a debacle in Seattle as well. Caleb Williams won't be benched. If Caleb Williams was benched, that'd be freaking nuts. And I think estimate this may be the last report that we have for today, is going to continue to get more reps. I mean, if you see this, estimate received 14 of 17 carries in week 10 for the running back position in Denver. So, I mean, RIP Javonte. Javonte looks like he's no longer viable. Jameis is still going to be the starter here in Cleveland. The Bengals are bringing in some depth at running back. Maybe they were just pissed with Khalil Herbert fumbling to open up the game. And I think that should be it. Sam Laporta considered day-to-day. Yours truly freaking needs Sam Laporta. Obviously, you can make an argument, well, Mason, who cares about you having Sam Laporta in the flock league? Go pick up a tight end up off the waiver wire. It's about the same thing anyway. But the issue is I have a bunch of freaking Sam Laporta with my underdog teams as well. So, I don't know. I need Laporta out there playing. I need Laporta giving us some more weeks like we just saw. But I think that should be it for all the news that we have today. Obviously, super interested to see what Tyreek Hill does tonight. Well, let's go ahead. I think we have a bunch of questions and teams to look at over on the site. And I do want to reiterate, of course, if you ever wanted to ask a question on flockfantasy.com, just hit the expert advice button anywhere on the site. Then you can go through and you can send in a team review, trade question, a start sit question, super message, whatever you are wanting. And you can ask this literally whenever you want. You don't have to be in the live stream. You don't even have to wait until we are streaming, because the second that we answer your question, you actually get a custom link sent through the site that takes you to the live stream where it was answered with the exact timestamp, where all you got to do is click that link and it takes you to your question getting answered there. So we'll spend a lot of time working on that for y'all. Make sure you take advantage. And if you wanted that free team review, obviously you can take advantage of the offer that we have with Underdog Fantasy. Or if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you'll get that 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you'll be getting a free Matthew Stafford pick for tonight's game, more than less than half total yard. If you signed up after the game tonight, then instead that's going to be a different pick for the Thursday night game. But you'll get the free pick, the 50% deposit bonus, and the free team review as well with promo code FLOCK on Underdog. So make sure you take advantage of that. And if you wanted the free team review, just go ahead and set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. That way we can go ahead and credit you with that free team review voucher. But let's move this over. This is going to be our first trade question coming out from Jackson. Says, we have Jefferson and Jamar, Javonte Dobbins, and Darnold. So Darnold, obviously, at quarterback, doesn't look like a super exciting play at this point. And maybe worse than other potential streaming options at the quarterback position. Pacheco potentially coming back in here already through the bye week as well. So say Pacheco comes back in 2 to 3 weeks. You may actually only get one additional game played from Malik Neighbors in comparison to Isaiah Pacheco. So I completely understand the thought process here, especially when you were this strong at wide receiver where you have Jefferson and Jamar, and we are losing Javonte as a viable RB. I like the idea of trading for Pacheco. I would just hope that we can get a little bit larger of a discount with this deal. I would stand by Neighbors here, leading the NFL in targets per game, but it's not far off whatsoever. Now, David coming out with our next question. This is a trade where we're sending Purdy and Debo for Hurts, Jennings. So give me Jalen Hurts over Debo Samuel. Give me Brock Purdy over Juwan Jennings. I think it is a relatively close deal. I think everybody's going to run and take the side of Juwan Jennings based off the fact that, yes, Debo Samuel did get outscored by Jennings this past week. But if you look at the large sample that you have here in San Francisco, I still stand by. I think Debo is very much the wide receiver one here. I do think Brock Purdy is better than a typical streaming option at quarterback. So this is another trade that is very close, and I completely understand the thought process of you wanting to make it. If it's a 4-point passing touchdown format, I probably go ahead and I just take the rushing upside that you get with Jalen Hurts. If it was a 6-point passing touchdown format, would definitely be a lot closer. Now, Bismo Funyuns coming out with our next question. This is Josh Jacobs and Noah Brown's an absolute zero. Hunter Henry's a streaming tight end. It's essentially, in my mind, Josh Jacobs for like Tony Pollard and Ladd McConkey. Pollard looks like he may no longer be viable with Tajay Spears turning this into committee, and obviously it is a bad offense. So I probably stand by having the 3-down running back here in Josh Jacobs. I actually do think that Ladd McConkey is a very interesting buy low candidate, because if you look at the future games that you're going to have here in Los Angeles, it actually does appear that the Chargers are going to be in more pass-happy game environments in general. So I don't mind you wanting to go through and wanting to buy Ladd McConkey. Just for me, I think that the downgrade that you're going to get going from Jacobs to Tony Pollard is too large. Knowing you're in a spot in which Pollard's in a garbage offense and he should have a lower percentage of his own backfield compared to Jacobs going to the future with Spears now healthy. Now, Datu coming out with our next question. This is Gibbs and Harrison versus Aaron Jones and CeeDee Lamb. So Harrison to Lamb, slight upgrade. Gibbs to Jones, pretty big downgrade, especially with Jones banged up. I'm going to go with the best player here in Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, if you viewed CeeDee Lamb still as a locked and loaded wide receiver 1 going into the future, I completely understand why you want to go through and why you want to make this deal. Just for me, I don't think Lamb is a wide receiver 1 anymore. I think Lamb is a wide receiver 2, which is what I'd put Harrison at as well. And I would much prefer Gibbs, who's fully healthy, over a banged up Aaron Jones. So for me, I'm going to stick with Jahmyr Gibbs as well as Marvin Harrison. Now, Oscar coming out of their next trade question says, need to win the rest of the games. Good with buys. So you have a bye week in week 12 for Burrow, bye week in week 14 for Nix, bye week in week 12 for Bijan, Barkley already through the bye, Rome, Pickens, both already through their buys, Terry, the bye week 14, Kittle already through his bye. But I mean, honestly, none of that nonsense makes that big of a difference. It's more so just a tiebreaker as you evaluate this. As I mean, if we go through and look at it, going from Bijan to Barkley, clear upgrade. Terry McLaurin to George Pickens, give me Terry, but it's not a massive gap, especially if you're getting the extra game played out of Pickens, and you're saying that we need to win out at this point. I don't think it's the worst move in the world. And then going ahead and taking Burrow and Ferguson to Kittle, give me Kittle, to be honest. I could just think Kittle's already tight end 1 in fantasy, and at the same time, with no Ayuk, he should be even better rest of season. So to be honest with you, I probably go the Barkley, Kittle, and Pickens side. I still think that Bo Nix is more so in line with what you typically expect with some quarterback streamers. And Nix isn't yet to the point where he is an absolute must-start option every single week regardless. But I think you getting the upgrade to Barkley is enough here, to be honest. Now, our next trade coming out from Brandon, this is Mixon versus Tyreek. I would rather have Mixon over Tyreek Hill at this point. Obviously, it's a difficult spot to know with Tyreek Hill exactly what the torn ligament is going to do and how this should impact him rest of season. It clearly is very encouraging that Tyreek's going to be playing this week. But Mixon's been so much better than Tyreek so far this season already. Mixon gets there in a tough matchup this past week against the Lions. The schedule actually really does look a lot better for Mixon going into the future. So honestly, I would prefer Mixon over Tyreek. Now, GM Garcia coming out with their next question. This is Montgomery and Wilson versus Kyren Williams. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Kyren. Kyren's yet to play this week, of course. But if you look at Kyren, he is kind of in the tier with Barkley, Henry. I mean, these true elite 3-down workhorse running backs. I mean, I don't know if you throw Henry in there because obviously he loses work on 3rd down, but it doesn't matter with the amount of fantasy points he scores. But if you go through and if you look at the amount of snaps that Kyren gives to other running backs in this backfield, tonight you may see Blake Corum play 1 snap. You may see Blake Corum play 2 snaps. So for me, I think I kind of easily go ahead and take the Kyron Williams side, to be honest. Now, Evan coming out with their next question says, stacked 6-team league, Neighbors, Cardinals by week 11. What are your thoughts? 6-team league, the last thing I'm going to be concerned about is a bye, just because you should always have options you can fill in easily. Also, if you're trading for Jonathan Taylor and Nico Collins, you're not getting any extra games played. Jonathan Taylor and Nico Collins both have their own respective buys in week 14. It's not like you're getting the extra games played with Pacheco. Pacheco's going to miss the next few weeks. So honestly, it's kind of irrelevant that Neighbors, Harrison, and Connor all have a week 11 bye here. Going from Connor to Pacheco, downgrade even in a 6-team league where the only thing that matters is upside. I mean, if you look at Connor, this is a running back that does have the best fantasy football playoff schedule of any RB in the NFL. Going from Neighbors to Nico, easily give me Nico. Going from Harrison to Jonathan Taylor, easily give me Jonathan Taylor. DJ Moore is literally worthless in a 6-team league in particular. Like, DJ Moore at this point looks like he may not be a top 30 wide receiver. If you play in a 6-team league, 6, S-I-X, then if he's not a top 30 wide receiver, he's a wide receiver 6. So, yeah, I think in a 6-team league in particular, I take the best player. The best player here is Nico Collins, and we shoot for the ceiling. But it's definitely not because the Cardinals guys and Neighbors have the week 11 bye. Now, Eli Davis coming out with their next question. This is Breece, Taylor, Tyreek versus Achane, A.J. Brown, Mike Evans. Give me A.J. Brown at this point over Tyreek Hill with Tyreek's injury. Give me Achane over Breece at this point with how bad the Jets offense looks. And Jonathan Taylor versus Evans, I'd rather have JT, but honestly, if you look at Evans, the games played rest of season may end up being the same as what you have with Jonathan Taylor, with Taylor having the week 14 bye, Evans having the week 11 bye, and then we're going to assume Evans is going to go in week 12. When Evans is back, you probably slate him in as a low-end RB1. Low-end wide receiver 1 to maybe even a high-end wide receiver 1, to be honest. So I'm probably going to go ahead. I'll probably take the Achane, A.J. Brown side. Obviously, this could look very bad, though, based off what happens in the game tonight. Now, going over to our next question, this is coming out from P. Juck. Here, this is a dynasty trade where we're sending an early to mid-second and Jerry Jeudy for Chris Godwin. For me, Jerry Jeudy just has no value, whether it's redraft or dynasty, to be completely honest with you. If you were to tell me, well, Mason, I need to contend, Godwin's not playing this year, my thing would be, well, Jerry Jeudy is not going to help your team, and if you think he will, you're not a true contender. Do I think Godwin's worth more than a guy that you're going to get in this second round in 2026? Probably. Or even at this 2025. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Godwin. Now, P-Jock coming out with another question. This is, I believe, a redraft question where this is Breece versus Amon-Ra St. Brown. If this was Dynasty, give me St. Brown. But here at running back, we have Montgomery, Dowdle, and that's it. Wide receiver, you have Metcalf, London, Waddle. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take the Breece Hall side. I mean, they are back-to-back in my rest of season rankings. I think that they are pretty damn close. Just ultimately, if you are looking at this, you need a running back more than a wide receiver, at least in my mind. Now, who's Ryan coming out with our next question? This is going to be a trade question where we're sending Terry and Roschon to get Chase Brown and Leggett. Well, I'd rather have Leggett over Roschon. And to be honest with you, I would rather have Chase Brown with Zach Moss out for the season over Terry McLaurin. Looking at the team that we have right now, our running back room is fine. We have Henry, Swift, White. But wide receiver, we also have Tyreek, Cup, Higgins. So we are strong at wide receiver. So for me, I know maybe it's crazy, but I'm looking at Lamb as I'm sorry, not Lamb. I'm looking at Chase as an elite 3-down running back for the time being, with the possibility that Khalil Herbert takes more work. But even if Khalil Herbert comes in and takes 20, 30% of this backfield, I still view Chase Brown as a high-end RB2 versus Terry McLaurin as a high-end wide receiver 2. And I think you are going to the upgrade from Leggett to Roschon. So I'd go Chase Brown here, to be honest. Now, Real Zay Flowers coming out with their next question says, need help for wide receiver 2. Also, with the lack of receivers, should we take Puka and Kupp and JT for Jamar and Chase Brown? Okay. Looking at this, Jamar versus, is this Puka, Kupp, and JT? What's the depth with this league? I mean, we have a solid running back. Most weeks in the future, you're going to be going with Mixon and Chase Brown, but you have plenty of running back depth to throw in that flex spot. But obviously, getting that upgrade there from Chase Brown to Jonathan Taylor is nice if you think that Chase Brown does see a little more competition as time goes on. You trade away Chase, then you're starting Kupp, Puka at wide receiver. Whereas right now, you're really choosing between like Brian Thomas and Calvin Ridley. Tight end, you're going to go Njoku most weeks over Gesicki. And in the flex as it stands, you're going to go Tracy. Obviously, this week, Tracy on bye, you're going with Kareem. So, wide receiver 2, you're really just choosing between Brian Thomas and Calvin Ridley week to week based off matchups. Obviously, Ridley has been much better, and Brian Thomas Jr. is now in a garbage offense just like Calvin Ridley with no Trevor Lawrence. So, it's a great team. Typically, with the strong team in this format, I'm not wanting to go through and trade away the best asset we have with Jamar Chase. But I do think it is a very fair price. And if you are, I don't know what our record is, but if you're in a spot where it's like win or go home, getting the Rams guys would be nice as well because you don't have to deal with the Week 12 bye. But if we're more so just thinking about the fantasy football playoffs, obviously Chase gives you the ceiling that the other two don't. So it's a very tough spot. If you played in a league where you had multiple flex spots, then I definitely would make this play. But in a league with only 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, where we already have a very strong roster, it's not necessarily something we need to do. But very, very tough and very close, to be honest. But let me refresh this. And we have our next question coming out. This is a free team review for, just confirm, Garrett. My guy, I appreciate you. Going to be excited to check this out. And I do want to remind y'all, of course, if y'all wanted to get that free team review, you can take advantage of the offer that we have over there on Underdog Fantasy, where if you go over to Underdog and use promo code FLOCK, you'll get that 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you're going to be getting a free Matthew Stafford pick, more than less than half a total yard for tonight's game. And you'll be getting the free team review on the site. Just make sure you use promo code FLOCK. And after you use code FLOCK or before, it doesn't matter. You set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. That way we can go ahead and we can accredit you with that free team review voucher. This is how it works is Underdog every morning sends me the list of email addresses for people who signed up to Underdog Fantasy with promo code FLOCK. And then that day we go through and we accredit everybody that has a same email address on the website, flockfantasy.com, with the free team review voucher. And then you go ahead and you submit it the same way that you would. You go through the team review process. And once you go through the team review process, you can get to the final page and it just says free next to my name. So make sure you take advantage of that if you have not done so already. But let's move this over to our next free team review from Garrett. It says, looking for overall team improvements that could be made. I've made several trades so far. Started 0-2. We traded Najee and Caleb for Burrow. Phenomenal move. Pollard for Mixon will be much better. Chuba and Amari for Jacobs and Terry. Great deal. And Kirko and Mooney for Kittle. You have legitimately crushed the rest of this league. It looks like maybe we changed the team name here. Let's go ahead and let's try to figure out what team we have. We should be the team with Burrow, Mixon, Kittle. So let's just go ahead and let's figure this out. For the team with Burrow, Mixon, Kittle. Okay, so this is the squad right here. This is a 2-quarterback league. So this will be a little bit of a different spot. It makes our Joe Burrow trade 10,000 times better. But obviously here it does maybe make sense to roster the third quarterback like Daniel Jones, or at least it did. Reading the tea leaves, it does seem like potentially Daniel Jones may be getting benched coming out of the bye week. So for me, I think that you could potentially be in a spot where it makes sense to instead pivot over to Derek Carr. Now, the issue is, if you look at how the bye weeks line up, Derek Carr does have the same bye week as Burrow. Obviously, we kind of need the quarterback down here on our bench to be able to cover for when Burrow misses. Darnold already threw the bye. But I would definitely continue to monitor what they are saying in New York, because it does seem like it's a very real possibility that Daniel Jones is going to get benched. But also you have Will Levis out there on the waiver wire. So maybe if you think Levis is going to continue to improve, and Levis already threw his bye as well, maybe you could go ahead and pick up Levis instead and drop Daniel Jones. But, I mean, if you knew Daniel Jones was good to go, then obviously at that point you would just hold on to Daniel Jones as your QB3, because he does have a little bit of rushing upside, of course, and you do have neighbors. Okay. Going over to running back, we are looking at Joe Mixon, Breece Hall. So we have presumably 2 running back ones that we can start every single week here, right? With very little hesitation. And we have some running back depth as well. I mean, you are sitting with the combo of Jacobs, who's a viable flex play, as well as Bucky. Issue is, obviously, if we are looking at what you're going to have, say, with Bucky Irving, it will be pretty much impossible to go through and trade Bucky for anything. Looking at maybe a Jacobs trade would be interesting to see if we can go and upgrade at quarterback, knowing that if we're looking at your starting lineup requirements, quarterback is going to make up a crazy high percentage of your starting lineup output, because I'm typically used to playing in super flex leagues where, I mean, you can also start, say, 3 wide receivers and 2 additional flex spots. So it's like, oh, okay, yeah, obviously quarterback's very important, but still wide receiver depth does matter somewhat. Here in this league, no, I mean, you don't have that many starting lineup slots, so quarterback is going to be effectively everything here for you. And going over to what you have at wide receiver, you are looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown, Terry McLaurin, DeAndre Hopkins, Devonta Smith, all as viable options. I mean, again, I would love to sell one of these wide receiver depth pieces in a 2-for-1 deal with a quarterback, see if we can go get a QB upgrade. And maybe we're overthinking this, but we are 5-4, right? So it's not like we're in a situation in which we can just say F it. The only thing that we care about is upside for the fantasy football playoffs. Now, we do have to focus in on winning games over the next few weeks as well. And where it would make a lot of sense to take a running back in a 2-for-1 deal and package with Darnold or package with Daniel Jones to go get a viable QB2 that we're really excited about given your league settings. The trade away Jacobs, it puts you in a compromising spot in week 12 for the bye week with Brees, as well as week 14 with the bye week with Mixon. Maybe the play that you could make, knowing that Hopkins, Smith, and Amon-Ra are all through their buys as well, and wide receiver depth isn't going to matter too much in this format, is maybe if we could take Terry McLaurin and Sam Darnold and go ahead, move them in a 2-for-1 deal where you can get a very exciting option there at quarterback. I think that'd make a lot of sense. Obviously, we need to find the teams that have maybe the expendable quarterback that they can't afford to get rid of. The team with Allen and Daniels, they just have too much. I mean, here, maybe the team with Kyler. Like, if you could go ahead and send Terry McLaurin and Sam Darnold to go get Kyler, I think that'd make a lot of sense. This team could potentially use that extra starter there, seeing how thin they are at running back, while at the same time they have Russ as a viable piece as their QB3 as well. Going through and seeing if there's another quarterback room that guys can afford to really let go of. Not particularly. I think really the Kyler team is the main one. Now, obviously, if you could go through and if you could make a deal with that team at the top that has that has Hurts and Daniels, we would. But it's just they don't need a wide receiver. And I don't see why they would want or be willing to trade away one of the elite level QBs. So that's the move if there is one to make with this team. Looking at waiver wire pivots, obviously if Godwin was taking up a roster spot, you drop Chris Godwin and you go pick up Juwan Jennings relatively easily. But I'm assuming that Godwin's on the IR, of course, and not taking up a roster spot. So honestly, I think you're already doing a great job with the waiver wire, and there's not much to focus in on here. Outside of if you think Daniel Jones getting benched out of the bye, potentially going through and dropping Daniel Jones and either picking up somebody like Derek Carr or Will Levis. Obviously, Carr is in a tough spot given the injuries that you have in New Orleans, plus the fact that, I don't know, you have the same bye week as Burrow, and that's kind of the week that we need to cover anyway. But I really appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. Again, thank you so much for taking advantage of that free Underdog team review. And yeah, thank you. David says, how do I get a free team review if I signed up to Underdog with code FLOCK but already had a Flock Fantasy account? All you have to do is make sure when you sign up to Underdog Fantasy and use code FLOCK, then it's the same email address as your flockfantasy.com account. It doesn't matter what order you sign up, whether you have an account on flockfantasy.com and then you sign up to Underdog and use code FLOCK on Underdog, or you sign up to Underdog with code FLOCK and then you set up an account on flockfantasy.com. It just needs to be the same email address on both accounts. That way I'm able to go through and that way I'm able to credit you with that free team review voucher. Now we have another free team review coming out from Alex the Lion. Says, wanted to see what you thought of the team. I traded Ramondre, Tillman for Kupp and Pacheco last week. Dear, how the hell did you do that? Would appreciate any advice. Thanks. Thank you. I really appreciate you. Congrats on absolutely robbing a league mate here. I can very clearly see why we are number one in the league analyzer in value rest of season. Now, obviously, we are not sitting here with the best record in the league by any means. You're only 5-4. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that, I mean, we've dealt with some injuries. We had the Jonathan Taylor, Joe Mixon respective injuries this year. And at the same time, you dealt with the Nico injury. So, I mean, you have a phenomenal squad. Now, looking at quarterback, we have two quarterbacks that we can comfortably play the matchups between with the combo of Purdy and Mahomes. Where, in my mind, if you look at my rankings, you'll see this. I think you're probably starting Purdy most weeks between the two of them. But Mahomes definitely looked like a better option since you've gotten another receiver in here with DeAndre Hopkins. But yeah, you completely fine rostering both these QBs and just playing the matchups weekly. Going over to running back, we have two elite running backs at the very top with Mixon and Taylor. We have Pacheco and Bucky as depth. And this is kind of a nice spot, right? Because if you look at the depth that you're going to need with this team, we're really not going to need another running back for about a month or so until week 14, where there you have both Mixon and Taylor on bye. But presumably, by the time you get to week 14, Pacheco may actually be back at that point and maybe usable depth, while at the same time, obviously, he gives us the upside anyway for the fantasy football playoffs. Going over to wide receiver, it's a league in which you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. So the wide receiver depth is really not too important in this league at all. And we are about to get Nico Collins back in, which should give us that elite level option. We have Kupp as another wide receiver 1. Terry is a very strong flex play. And then down DJ Moore as guys that probably will never hit your starting lineup with a team this good in a league where you have these shorter settings or shallower settings. So I'm trying to think if there's anything that we could do with this team other than trade away a tight end. With how strong your team is, you could also afford to go out there and get a true elite level quarterback. And it'd be a very easy move as well to just trade away one of the elite level tight ends, send Brock Bowers and Brock Purdy, and see if you can go get a quarterback on the Mount Rushmore. Whether that's Jaden Daniels, whether that's Lamar Jackson, whether that's Josh Allen, whether that's Jalen Hurts, it may not matter. Like looking at this team, they're stuck playing Pitts. They have Jalen Hurts and Baker Mayfield at quarterback. Maybe they think that Baker is a strong option regardless. So, I mean, if you could send them the combo of Brock Purdy and Deebo Samuel to go ahead and see if we can get Jalen Hurts, I think that would be a no-brainer. This team has Jaden Daniels. They have Cade Otton going into the bye week. Obviously, Evans coming back in the long term. Maybe they're viewing Cade Otton as someone that they're not willing to trust long term. So, I mean, if you could send them Bowers and Purdy to go get Daniels, I actually think that makes a lot of sense as well. Going and trying to find the number 1 team here with a quarterback of Lamar Jackson. Now they are getting the injury to this team's 6-3. That tells you how good freaking Lamar has been so far this season. But they're getting the injury to Kincaid. And at the same time, their wide receiver depth maybe is a little bit lackluster given the league's settings where it's a 10-team format. So, I mean, if you could send them, say, Bowers, Downs, and Purdy to go get to Lamar Jackson, that would be an absolute no-brainer. Yeah, my thing is, you have by far and away the best team in this league. You can see it with the league analyzer. When you're this strong, I mean, you really have no excuse. You can afford to go out there and get a true elite level quarterback here. So that would be my thing. When we were sitting with both Kittle and Bowers, I would love to see if we could send one of the tight ends in a 2-for-1 deal with the current quarterback that we have to go potentially get an upgrade at the quarterback position. But again, thank you. I really do appreciate you. I really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. And yeah, thank you again for taking advantage of that free team review. Now let's move this over to our next question coming out from Fantasy P. This is Lamb versus Brian Thomas and Hawkinson. Obviously, Hawkinson looks phenomenal at this point. I stand by. I think Hawkinson, if you're just going straight talent profiles, Hawkinson's a top 5 tight end in the NFL. But to be fair, Brian Thomas is pretty much nothing at this point with the Trevor Lawrence injury. I think I would still rather have Lamb. If you look at the target volume, Lamb did have 10 targets this past week. I mean, if Jerry would have just put down the curtains in the stadium, then at that point, maybe you would have had a touchdown for Lamb. So I don't know. It's not an easy call by any means. But for me, I think I would go with Lamb over Brian Thomas and TJ Hawkinson. Now, Red Bottom Sky coming out with our next question says 7-2, looking to trade for playoff wide receivers. Running backs are Barkley, Kyron, Brees. Wide receivers are Amari and Waddle. So obviously we made the video, I want to say maybe 2 weeks ago at this point, where we talked about a CeeDee Lamb having the best playoff schedule of pretty much any wide receiver in fantasy. I'm sorry, I didn't know that Dak Prescott was going to get injured. I mean, now that you have no Dak for the fantasy football playoffs, Dak's effectively out for the season here. It doesn't matter how good the schedule is for CeeDee Lamb. He's still probably just a high-end wide receiver too. A Waddle to Ridley upgrade at this point. Kyron to Connor, clear downgrade. You're getting Lamb. Lamb would definitely start over Waddle, that's for sure. But can y'all spam the chat? What side would y'all rather have here? Would y'all rather have the Lamb, Ridley, Connor side or the Kyron, Waddle, Corum side? Please let me know what side you're going to go with. This team does need a little bit of help at receiver, which is worth pointing out. We got Kyron, Lamb, Kyron, Lamb, Kyron, Kyron. Lamb, Kyron. Kyron, Lamb, Kyron, Lamb. Lamb, Kyron, Lamb. It does look like it is split 50-50. If you wanted to make the deal, I'm not going to fault you for it. I think it's a very fair trade, especially knowing that James Conner does have the best playoff schedule of any running back in fantasy at this point. But plus, if you do think that the Tyreek injury limits him in any way, maybe Waddle is a little bit better going into the future than what he has been. Since you need a wide receiver, and plus you having a great matchup, I mean, a great schedule for the playoffs, not only with Lamb, but also with Connor. I think you can go ahead. I think you can take the Lamb side. And thank you for letting me know, Teresa. I think I put my phone on a cord. Let me know if my microphone sounds better now, or we'll maybe try to figure it out. Now, let's move this over to our next question. Coming out from Purdy's Nuts. Says, trade already accepted. Team is wide receiver heavy, and my wide receiver room is Pollard, Chase Brown, Dowdle, Pacheco. Terry to Ladd, clear downgrade. Chase Brown to Derrick Henry, clear upgrade. I think that this is a no-brainer deal to just go ahead and get the best player, especially if you actually look at the schedule for Ladd McConkey going into the future. It should actually be really good, where we've seen Ladd clearly be the wide receiver one in Los Angeles, while at the same time, he's been viable in games where they've actually been forced to throw the football. Obviously, that hasn't exactly been the case as of late, where the Chargers are just absolutely putting a smackdown on most teams that they have been playing. They've had great matchups, such as the Titans, such as the Saints a couple weeks back. But if you look into the future, it is actually going to be a much tougher spot for this Chargers team. They may actually be forced to throw the ball a bit here. And with that scenario, very much I do think that Ladd McConkey could be not in a similar range as Terry, but not a massive downgrade. And then obviously Henry is a very much a clear upgrade over Chase Brown. Now that Morris kid out here again. We have looked at this team a ton. It is a juggernaut. Happy to see you. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question and a free start sit question, my guy, just in case there's anything else that you want to follow up with this team. But it says, Sup Mason, team keeps getting better. Now I'm in a spot where Evans is a depth piece. This is also a league where you can start 4 wide receivers, and it's a 12-team format, so it's just freaking nuts. With the trade deadline this week and playoffs coming up, do we make any moves like packaging Evans and another receiver or running back to go for a top 3 to 5 overall asset? Or do we just sit on Evans for depth in case of an injury? Much love, my guy. Obviously, you are a playoff team. There are 2 teams in this league that are competing. It's Old Greg, the 4-time champ, and a touch of downs. These are the only 2 teams that really have any business in it. This is a league in which you can start 4 wide receivers weekly. And at the same time, you are looking at a 12-team format, so the waiver wire is going to be a little bit thinner. But as you look at this, we have an insane wide receiver room at this point. Obviously, we'll go through every position. Keep it super brief with quarterback. Allen must start quarterback every single week, regardless of the matchup. He's on the Mount Rushmore, guys, where you have both the passing volume and the rushing ceiling. So, yeah. I mean, really, there's nothing to discuss. You don't need to roster another quarterback, of course. Going over to what you have at running back. You are currently sitting with Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor. So we have 2 running back ones rest of season. Obviously, neither guy has a crazy high role as a receiver, but you did see the 4 targets for Taylor this past week, so that's getting a little bit better. Jonathan Brooks at this point, I still stand by. I think that he is going to come in, and he probably is going to be playing a small role in a committee here, especially post Miles Sanders' injury. But it doesn't look like Jonathan Brooks himself will be viable in fantasy. I think really the only impact that Jonathan Brooks has is he potentially eats into Chuba Hubbard just a bit. And I see everybody in the chat saying it's a 2-team league. This isn't a 2-team league. This is a 12-team format. Old Greg the 4-time. We've seen this team like 5 times. He's just flexing on us at this point. But running back depth would be like the only thing that this team is struggling with, right? I would say that you have absolutely no business in ever going through and rostering guys like Odell Beckham Jr., Xavier Hutchinson. I understand maybe you picked him up due to the fact that we had the game time decisions of both Nico Collins as well as Tyreek Hill. Obviously, Mike Evans missed this week as well. But I mean, the very clear move to make as soon as this week's over is you cut Odell, you cut Xavier Hutchinson, and instead you go ahead and you pick up 2 running backs off the waiver wire that are an injury away from making a difference. Those 2 guys would be players like Audric Estime and Trey Benson. So a very clear spot to just go ahead and pick up those 2 RBs, especially with Audric Estime himself actually expanding his role already. And then at wide receiver, I know you're wondering like, oh, should we sell Mike Evans? Obviously, he's our wide receiver 5. I would say no. You can start 4 wide receivers here weekly in this league. And the same tone as that, like, you're in a situation in which Evans has more fantasy football playoff appeal than he does in the short term. Like a team that needs to win this week, they're not trading for Mike Evans. A team that needs Mike Evans is your team. Where we are sitting here with the really clear laid out path for the fantasy football playoffs. Going over to tight ends, we have Kelsey and Taysom. So I think you can cut Taysom if you wanted to just pick up another running back that's an injury away from making a difference, like Roschon Johnson. Because then all of a sudden, I mean, really the only way a player can hit your starting lineup is if all of a sudden you get an injury to like Bijan and then Tyler Algier turns into a 3-down back, right? Like the only way that one of these depth guys at the bottom end on a team that's as strong as this really makes the difference is if they're that handcuffed back that actually gets a job. But yeah, the last thing I would do is look to trade away any of your receivers. It'd be very different if it was a 2 wide receiver 1 flex format, but Evans could end up being a starter over one of these guys ahead of him. Obviously, you have both Nico and Tyreek banged up here a bit. And with Evans at the same time, you are looking at a receiver that has no Godwin when he does make it back to Tampa. So I leave the wide receiver room as is in terms of trades. I think you've already built an insane roster here. Really, the only thing I do is cut pretty much all the ancillary pieces at the very bottom. I would go and try to roster as many of those running backs as I could, such as Estime, Benson, Roshan, because really the only thing that this team could see making a difference is a running back that gets an injury in front of him and steps into a full-blown starting role. But I really do appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this, my guy. Again, I know that you've built this juggernaut through the course of the entire season. Everybody in the chat spamming, saying how good the team is. They want to see the worst team in the league. Here's the worst team in the league, everyone. The worst team in the league has Rome Odunze, Xavier Worthy, Jordan Addison as their top 3 receivers. R.I.P. But thank you again, Morris. I hope I was able to help you out. I did hook you up with that free start sit question and that free trade question as well. Daniel says, hey, Mason, how do we feel about the yards props tonight? We can look at the underdog pick'ems if y'all want. Looking at the underdog pick'ems here, one thing that's interesting is obviously, like I said at the very top, I don't have a clear read on how this Tyreek wrist injury is going to be impacting him. Like, if you know, hey, Mason, I know exactly what a torn ligaments like in the wrist. I know that Tyreek's going to be on a snap count. I know that Tyreek's going to be limited. And you wanted to go lower than 77.5 total yards. You do you. But for me, I'm an idiot. I have no information on this. I'm just going to be watching the game and see what happens tonight. I would say if I had Tyreek Hill in fantasy, I'm for sure going through and starting him. But I don't know if I want to take the lower than 77.5 total yards by any means. Going over and looking at some of the other receivers, you have Waddle, higher, lower, 40.5 receiving yards, which obviously I'm very biased. We won 6 figures on Underdog a couple years back, and a big reason for that was with Jalen Waddle. So I want to go, Jalen Waddle, great matchup. And at the same time, you have Tyreek Hill, potentially a little bit limited in it. Let's go with Waddle to have at least 40 receiving yards. But Waddle has had only 4 games this season with 40 receiving yards. You know what? This may actually not be the worst pick. This may actually be a strong one, because if you look at this, obviously it's a great matchup going up against the Rams here. Not only is it a great matchup going up against the Rams, but at the same time, you've seen 4 games with Tua for Jalen Waddle. And in those 4 games, Waddle had 3 of them at least hitting 40 receiving yards. Plus, you have a limited Tyreek. Plus, it's a great matchup. So honestly, maybe Waddle higher than 40.5 receiving yards could be a viable move. I think a lot of it comes down to what you think with the Tyreek wrist. Also, I think Demarcus Robinson is honestly set to absolutely crash here. Like, I wouldn't fault you at all if you wanted to go with the lower than 29.5 receiving yards for Waddle. I mean, 29.5 receiving yards for Robinson. Robinson has crushed this most weeks this season, but most weeks this season, you had no Puka, you had no Cup. He crushed it this past week, but it was a game that went to overtime, and obviously you get Puka tossed immediately. So if I was looking at picks for tonight, those would be the ones that I want. But obviously, if y'all are on Underdog Fantasy, you can go check them all out yourself. If you're not already on Underdog, it's available in pretty much every state. It's available in Texas. It's available in California. It's available in Florida. If you use promo code FLOCK on Underdog, you're also going to get a free Matthew Stafford pick, more than less than half a total yard for the game tonight. That one I'm very confident about. And also, you'll get a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single night as well. If you wanted that free team review voucher, all you got to do is make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. That way I know who to credit with that free team review. And you'll get that free team review voucher tomorrow morning, because every morning Underdog sends us the list of everybody who's used code FLOCK from the previous 24 hours. And then we can go ahead and we can credit those accounts with the free team review voucher. Now, B-Dub coming out with our next question says, I need 37 from Achane and Tyreek. How am I looking? And we can go right back to the projections here. I'm assuming that you're playing in a full PPR format, but right now you actually have Achane higher, lower, about 17 points here in a half PPR league on Underdog. You would assume that this would get pushed up if it was a full PPR format, closer to like 18.5 points for Achane. And then looking at Tyreek Hill, you're sitting at about 13.5 fantasy points. You'd assume that would get pushed up closer to about 15.5 fantasy points if this was a full PPR league. So I think you are going to be right there, should be a pretty damn good sweat. Obviously, a lot of it comes down to the Tyreek injury, where it's just very difficult to know exactly what to expect with the torn ligament. And again, I want to reiterate, I'm an idiot. I have no idea. Now, our next question coming out from 444, longtime member of the flock. Here, this is Gibbs, Harrison, Adams versus Kamara and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Gibbs to Kamara. Give me Kamara, but they're not super far off. It's just the receiving usage for Kamara is insane. Kamara, you'd have to deal with the week 12 bye. However, where Gibbs is already through his. Harrison and Adams versus Amon-Ra St. Brown. This is a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format. Afterwards at receiver, we'd be sitting with Kupp, St. Brown, and that's really it. I think you can make this deal, but if you do it, you really need to go heavy into what you have with wide receiver depth pieces off the waiver wire. If you tell me that your waiver wire is thin here in a 12-team format where all your league mates know what they're doing and you're not going to be able to pick up a potential viable wide receiver depth piece, then at that point, I would probably take the package of the 3 options. My thought process is I'd rather have Kamara over Gibbs. I'd rather have St. Brown over Adams or Harrison. So I'd probably just go with this side getting the best player. But a lot of it comes down to how you feel about backfilling with depth off the waiver wire in your league as well. Now, looking at what we have with our next question. This one coming out from Lucky. This is Jacobs, Lamb, Higgins versus Kamara, Brown, Flowers. Jacobs to Kamara, massive upgrade. I do want to reiterate and just show exactly how good Alvin Kamara has been so far this season. And it's kind of irrelevant how good or bad the offense has been, because obviously we've seen Alvin Kamara in an offense with Spencer freaking Rattler. And even then, Kamara has been viable. But Kamara this season, let's not pull up his ESPN game log. Instead, let's pull up what we have on Sleeper. That way we can see the actual fantasy points attached to it. Looking at this with Kamara, I believe he is the running back 2 in points. What are we looking for? I'm sorry, I got distracted with the trade offer. Um, Kamara is the running back 2 at this moment. If you go fantasy points from Kamara by week, 22, 44, 15, 24, 12, 17. The game with 8, you had no Carr. Then 18, 27, 15. Kamara's averaging over 20 fantasy points a game. And Carr is healthy at this point. So I view Kamara as like by far and away the best asset in this deal, to be honest. Chase Brown, Josh Jacobs, very similar. Up to you. Higgins versus Flowers, very similar. Up to you. Lamb versus Kamara, give me Lamb, and I don't think it's too close. So for me, yeah, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take the Kamara side, to be honest. If I said give me Lamb, it's not close. Obviously, I misspoke. Give me Kamara, it's not close. Okay. Boyd Roll coming out with our bot T-roll, something like that, coming out with our next question. This is Jacobs, Hopkins, Debo versus CMC and Terry. Jacobs to CMC, give me McCaffrey. Hopkins to Terry, up to you. I think you go and get McCaffrey here. McCaffrey right now is the top 5 asset in fantasy rest of season. He comes in and he doesn't score the touchdown, so it doesn't look crazy with what he does immediately in San Fran, or I guess it was in Tampa. But he does see every single snap. He sees every single touch in this backfield. Like, he immediately is prime Christian McCaffrey. So for me, I have CMC as a top 5 asset rest of season. And I think it's a very reasonable price point to go out and get him, to be honest. Now, moving over to our next question. This is coming out from Red Bottom Sky. It says, trade 1, keep 2, best playoff schedule, Saquon, Kyren, Hall. So I can give you my rankings of these guys, and I can tell you who I would trade. As my rankings of them, I have Saquon Barkley as running back 1 overall rest of season. And I have Kyren Williams as running back 2 overall rest of season. I have Saquon and Kyren in my mind as the absolute best running backs in fantasy. Now, the issue is, while yes, Breece does have a very good schedule going into the future, if you were to trade Breece, you're not going to get the price point that you'd want. Absolutely nobody is going through and trading for any New York Jet at this point. So while Breece is definitely like the least valuable player here, he's the lowest guy in my rankings, he does have a pretty damn good playoff schedule. And base expectations would be you're just getting significantly less value out of him than if you were to sell Kyren or Barkley, or at least you should be getting much less value out of him. So Breece would be the first guy I'd be looking to sell if you needed to sell one of these running backs. My thing is, if you play in a league where you start like 2 wide receivers and 1 flex, how the hell does anybody ever beat your team if you go into the season? I mean, you go into the playoffs with Barkley, Kyren, running back 1, running back 2, and Breece RB3. I don't know who could potentially compete with that, to be honest. But let me move this over. And obviously, if you wanted to get any questions, guaranteed answers, you can always ask them on the site whenever you want. You can hit the link in the live chat that says ask a question here, or you could go over and hit the personalized advice button in the top right corner on the site. There you can send in a super message, a start set question, a trade question, a team review, whatever you are wanting. Again, I do want to reiterate though, if you wanted that team review, I'd highly recommend taking advantage of the offer that we have with Underdog Fantasy, where if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you'll be getting a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you'll be getting a free Matthew Stafford pick, more than less than half a total yard for the game tonight as well. And you'll be getting that free team review in the live stream that we are doing every single day. Just make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. That way I know who to credit with that free team review voucher. But let's move this back over and let me answer some of the questions that we have on the site real quick. So if you have any questions, please drop them on the site. Drop them in the chat. I'd be happy to try to answer as many as we can. Mr. Stay Inside says, what is this clickbait? What did we title the live stream? Tyreek Hill torn wrist ligament. Live Q&A. Just in case you did not hear, my friend, Tyreek Hill does indeed have a torn wrist ligament. Whether you want to believe it or not, it is the fact of the matter. Am I saying you bench Tyreek Hill from it? No. Am I saying that you possibly lower expectations? Possibly. So definitely doesn't mean you got to bench Tyreek Hill. But it will be interesting to see what we have, of course, in the game tonight. Hayden says Debo and Downs for A.J. Brown. At this point, you 100% have to go with A.J. Brown. I do think that more likely than not, Deebo Samuel still is a high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1 rest of season with no Brandon Ayuk. Now, obviously, with that being said, he did just get outproduced by Jawan Jennings as well as the Ricky Pearsall. But if you're looking at A.J. Brown's in a different tier. Asian Artifacts, always happy to see it, says Bijan and Cup for Chase and JT. I'm 3-6. Won 4 weeks in a row now after today. So we started off 0-6 and now we've won 4 games straight. That is insane. Going from Bijan to JT, clear downgrade if you're looking at the receiving usage. Cup to Chase, clear upgrade. We have Gibbs, Bijan, White, Irving, Cup, Evans, Dell. I think you can make that move. The only hesitation, or one of the hesitations that I will have with it though, is if you are currently sitting at 4-6, you very much are in a situation in which you need a win right this second. You can't necessarily just be thinking about long-term upside. You kind of need a win out at this point. And you are trading for Chase, who still has to go through the bye. But clearly Chase is wide receiver 1 overall. Now, Nicholas has just traded Jamar and Kamara for Collins and Saquon. Jamar to Saquon, kind of going to be up to you. Going from Kamara to Nico Collins, I'd probably rather have I would honestly maybe rather have the Chase and Kamara side there. I completely understand why you did it. And there is an outside chance that Nico Collins does outproduce Jamar Chase rest of season. And if that is the case, then obviously, you are just super excited for the fact that you made that move. Herman says, would you trade Lamb? Obviously, we talked about Lamb having the massive hit as soon as Dak Prescott went down last week. But to be honest with you, now I think people, at least based off what I see in the live stream, based off what I see in the comment section, last week when we were talking about how Lamb should be dramatically hit with no Dak, I had a bunch of people screaming at me in the comment section saying how good Cooper Rush is and how CeeDee Lamb's going to be just fine. From what I see this week is I don't see anybody having that same statement. I see everybody kind of being okay with me saying that CeeDee Lamb's now a wide receiver 2. So honestly, I think maybe you did it. Maybe you looked to trade away Lamb too late. Realistically speaking, who is going to be now excited to trade for CeeDee Lamb with what just happened in Dallas? Yoink says, is Trey Lance a must-add league winner? Ooh. I will tell you for 100% certainty, if Trey Lance is the starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, where McCarthy comes out and before the week and he says, Lance is going to be our starter, we're done with Cooper Rush, I will pick up Trey Lance in the flock league. Now, would I recommend that you do the same? Definitely not. Would I be doing it kind of as a joke? Yes. But, your boy would love to see it. Now, let's see. Boxed Out says, Pacheco or Kenneth Walker for the playoffs? I'm 8-2. Very, very easily Kenneth Walker. Very easily Kenneth Walker. Not even remotely close, to be honest with you. Chattel says, trade Jamar Chase for Cedric Tillman. I mean, this is a close one, right? Because Jamar Chase, yes, maybe he has his week. Maybe he gives you a little nice stretch of games. But we've known for a long time now, and we've seen consistently at this point, that Cedric Tillman is an elite alpha and a bona fide stud. We've known for a long time now that Jameis Winston is an elite quarterback. Whereas you go through and you look at these guys with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, yeah, they give you a nice little stretch of games here, but can we really say that we have the sample size that we need to view them in that elite level tier? So for me, it's really close. I probably have Cedric Tillman and Jamar Chase ranked back to back in my rest of season rankings. Maybe we go with the Tillman side because Tillman already has gone through his bye week. Whereas Jamar Chase, you're still going to have to deal with it in week 12. Now, this would be a no-brainer. Craig says, I was thinking about Jamar Chase for Bub Means and Cedric Tillman. Is this worth it? Now, obviously, we can kind of go back and forth. It's really close. Chase or Tillman. But if you're able to get Bub Means thrown into the deal, as just a throw, 100% you have to do this trade. I would honestly send this out. Obviously, I have Jamar Chase in the flock league. I would go and offer Bush, who I think has Cedric Tillman, and potentially Bob Means as well. I would offer it to him. I just know that he's too smart to accept it, right? Like, there's no way that he would send me Tillman. Yeah, Bob Means changes everything there. And I know it'd be fleecing. That's why I'm not even going to bother sending the offer, but let me move this over and see if we have any more questions coming through with the sites. Elijah coming out with a trade question. This is Brock Purdy, DK Metcalf, K. Dotton versus Jalen Hurts and Mike Evans. This is going to be the Jalen Hurts side easily. I forgot what the other deal that we looked at was here. But obviously, massive upgrade going from Purdy to Hurts. A massive I want to say upgrade points per game going from Metcalf to Evans. Obviously, we're assuming that you get more games from Metcalf. So I think that they are very close in the rankings, and it's kind of up to you and your team situation. But looking at Kate Auden essentially getting this deal done for us, well, Auden obviously has been insane. At the same time, it's been in the environment in which you've had no Evans and you had no Godwin. So going into the future, I think it is much tougher once you come out of the bye week for Auden to assume that he is just a locked and loaded top 5 tight end rest of season. I actually probably need to move him behind Hawkinson, to be honest. Now, a San Francisco 49ers fan coming out says, start to Cup, Tyreek, Puka, full PPR formats. This is a tough spot. If we knew that Tyreek was 100% healthy, I would probably go Tyreek and Cup. But with the torn ligament in Tyreek's wrist, I do think that you have a little bit of hesitation with this, where you can potentially make an argument here to go with the Rams receivers. For me, I would still go ahead and I'd play Tyreek. I'm going to go Tyreek and Cup. Can y'all please spam the chat? Who would you rather play tonight? Would you rather play Tyreek Hill or would you rather play Puka Nacua? I'm going Tyreek. I would bench Puka. But let me know if y'all think I'm wrong. We got Puka, 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 Puka. Everybody is on Puka. If you go and look at the projections on Underdog, it's not close. I wonder, do they have rivals on here? I wonder if they have a rival between Tyreek and Puka. If y'all think Puka is a better option than Tyreek Hill, you can literally take Puka to go higher than Tyreek Hill receiving yards this week on Underdog and get an additional 7 receiving yards added on to the Puka side. For me, am I doing that? No, because I don't have nearly enough information about the Tyreek Hill injury to feel confident. But everybody in the chat saying Puka here. I mean, I got your pick for you. And obviously, I would go Tyreek. I do want to reiterate that. But if y'all wanted to check out any of these picks, I know we don't show the rivals too often because maybe it's a little bit more confusing for people to understand. Like here, receiving yards, you can go to Marcus Robinson versus Jonnu Smith. If you take the DeMarcus Robinson side, you would actually get 5 extra yards added to DeMarcus Robinson, which crazy. I didn't realize Jonnu projected this way. But anyway, if y'all wanted to check this out, you can find the link to Underdog Fantasy in the live chat in the description, of course. Promo code FLOCK is going to give you 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. And at the same time, you're going to be getting a free Matthew Stafford pick, more than less than half a total yard for the game tonight, and a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single night as well. Just make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. But let me see if we have any more questions coming in with the site. We do not. So the game starts in about 5 minutes. Your boy's going to have to run and grab dinner, and then I'm probably going to miss the first 5 minutes of actual gameplay here. So your boy wants to run and grab dinner, so I miss the smallest amount of the game as I possibly can. Also, I'll be live streaming, of course, after the game tonight, talking about everything that's happened. But much love. Do appreciate you. And really hope I get to see you out with the live stream after the game tonight.